An empire can seem eternal. It can rule over peoples, cities, deserts, mountains, and kingdoms. It can have palaces, armies, roads, and kings before whom the world kneels. But sometimes even the greatest power in history begins to die long before the enemy sets fire to its palaces. This is the story of Persia, the empire that conquered the ancient world, raised the King of Kings above all nations, and finally saw its symbolic heart burn in flames. Amidst giant columns, stone reliefs, and palaces designed to impress the world, stands Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, founded by Darius I in 518 BC. This is not just a city. This is the stage of power, the place where the King of Kings received delegations from distant peoples, Medes, Babylonians, Egyptians, Libyans, Bactrians, and Indians. All of them were carved in stone, advancing in silence and paying homage to the center of the world. But now that world is falling apart. In 330 BC, Alexander the Great enters Persepolis. The symbolic heart of the Persian Empire is now in his hands. Shortly thereafter, fire consumes the palaces. Ancient sources are not entirely unanimous. Some speak of revenge, of the Persian destruction of Greek temples, others of a decision taken amidst excesses and celebration. But the result is the same. The great stage of Achaemenid power remains forever scarred by the flames. And here the question begins. How could an empire that dominated from the Aegean Sea to the gates of India reach this point? Because Persia wasn't just another power of antiquity, it was the greatest empire the world had ever known. Its formation began around 550 BC, when Cyrus the Great defeated the Median king Astyages and laid the foundations of a new superpower. Cyrus did not build his empire with swords alone. He did it with victories, diplomacy, and extraordinary political intelligence. His empire extended from Lydia to the Indus, a scale that no previous ruler had been able to keep under one authority. Persia ruled ancient cities, deserts, mountains, temples, ports, nomadic peoples, and entire kingdoms. She didn't force all her subjects to become Persians. She did something much more effective. She integrated them into the imperial machine. Satrapies, royal roads, envoys, taxes, multi-ethnic armies, monumental capitals, religions tolerated when they served order. And above all stood a powerful idea that different peoples could live under the shadow of a single sovereign, the King of Kings. But no empire lasts forever. Before Alexander, before the flames, before the fall, there was one man who changed history: Cyrus. And to understand how Persia died, we must first understand how it was born. Before Persia existed as an empire, the world was already full of kings who believed themselves invincible. To the west, Lydia controlled one of the richest regions of Anatolia. Its king, Croesus, would be remembered for his almost legendary wealth. To the south, Egypt was still an ancient civilization, protected by the Nile, its temples, and the memory of the pharaohs. In Mesopotamia, Babylon shone as one of the most powerful cities of the ancient world. Its walls, temples, and religious prestige made it a jewel coveted by any conqueror. And to the north and east of Persia, the Medes dominated the territories of the Iranian plateau. Among them all, almost silently, stood the Persians. They were not yet masters of the world. They did not rule Babylon. They did not control Egypt. They did not rule over Asia Minor. They were an Iranian people who settled in Persis, a mountainous region in southwestern Iran, now known as Fars. There, amidst valleys, plateaus, and difficult roads, a distinct identity developed. A land of clans, local chieftains and warriors accustomed to surviving far from major centers of power, the Persians did not seem destined to dominate the world. In fact, for a long time, the great power in the region was not Persia, but Media, The Medes were culturally close to the Persians, but they had more power, more prestige, and a dominant position in the region. Persia lived in the shadow of Media, and that shadow seemed eternal. But history rarely warns in advance when power changes hands. In the Anshan region, associated with the ancient Elamite world, a family ruled that claimed descent from Achaemen. This name would later become known as the Achaemenids. For generations, these Persian kings were just another pawn on the political chessboard of the East, too small to intimidate Babylon, too peripheral to worry Egypt, too dependent to openly oppose Media. But they had something that others did not expect. They stood at the crossroads between worlds. They knew the mountains, but also the old traditions of Elam and Mesopotamia. They were frontier warriors, but they learned from much older civilizations. They weren't locked into one culture, they absorbed several, and that combination would prove decisive. Because the Persian Empire would not be born out of nothing, it would be born out of a world that was already old, exhausted by centuries of wars, alliances, and betrayals. Lydia watched the West. Babylon dominated Mesopotamia. Egypt held sway in the south. Media imposed its authority on the high plateau. And Persia waited until a king appeared, capable of destroying the balance. His name was Cyrus. And when he rose up against the Medes, no one imagined that this regional conflict would be the first step towards the greatest empire that antiquity had ever seen. Cyrus was not born in the center of the world. He was born on the periphery, in a mountainous, harsh land, far from the splendor of Babylon and the wealth of Lydia, a land where the Persians were not yet perceived as a global threat, but as just another people in the complex balance of the Iranian plateau. But Cyrus belonged to an ambitious family. He was king of Anshan, a region connected to Persis and the ancient Elamite world. His lineage would be remembered as part of the Achaemenid house, although at the time no one could have imagined how far that name would reach. The shadow of Media still hung over him. The Medes were the great Iranian power. They controlled vast territories, had military prestige, and dominated other peoples in the region. For any observer of the time, if anyone was destined to rule the East, it was them, not the Persians. But empires don't always fall because of an external enemy. Sometimes they begin to crack from within. According to ancient legends, the Median king Astyages began to distrust Cyrus. He feared his rise. He feared his popularity. He feared that this seemingly submissive Persian king was turning into something much more dangerous. And he was right. Around the middle of the 6th century BC, Cyrus rebelled against the Medes. This wasn't just a local uprising. This was a war for control of the Iranian world. The result changed history. Astyages was defeated. Ecbatana, the great Median city, fell to Cyrus, and Persia, which had lived in Media's shadow until then, took its place. But here's the important part. Cyrus didn't destroy the Median power. He absorbed it. He didn't destroy everything to start from scratch. He took the structures that already existed. He integrated nobles, soldiers, and territories, and turned regional victory into the foundation of an empire. This was his talent. Cyrus understood that conquest was only the first step. Then came the hard part: ruling. With Media in its hands, Persia ceased to be a secondary power. Now it controlled the heart of the Iranian plateau and could look westward to one of the richest kingdoms of the age, Lydia. Its king, Croesus, was known for his immense wealth. He ruled from Sardis in Anatolia, and his power extended over the Greek cities along the Ionian coast. For Croesus, the rise of Cyrus was a threat he could not ignore, so he decided to act. But when he faced Cyrus, Croesus made a mistake that many others would later repeat. He believed that Persia was simply a new kingdom. He did not realize that before him stood an imperial machine in the process of being built. The war between Lydia and Persia ended with the fall of Sardis. Croesus lost his throne. power over Asia Minor opened up to the Persians. And the Greek cities of Ionia, which would later become a source of huge conflict, came under the rule of the Achaemenids. Cyrus was no longer just a conqueror of the Medes. He was the master of an empire that stretched to all horizons. But there was another city. Babylon was not just a city. It was a symbol. For centuries, its name had been associated with power, wealth, and the gods of Mesopotamia. Its temples dominated the landscape. Its walls protected one of the most prestigious capitals of the ancient world. And at the center of it all stood Marduk, the great god of the city. He who ruled Babylon did not possess mere conquest. He possessed legitimacy. But when Cyrus turned his gaze south, Babylon was no longer as invulnerable as it had seemed. Its king, Nabonidus, had awakened deep tensions. His religious decisions, his long absence from the city, and his difficult relations with some of the Babylonian priesthood weakened his power. For many in Babylon, the throne no longer represented the sacred balance that was supposed to protect the city. Cyrus saw the opportunity. He didn't just present himself as an invader, he presented himself as a restorer. That was one of his greatest political achievements. In 539 BC, the Persian army marched on Babylon. There had been previous battles, and Nabonidus's power was rapidly crumbling. But the Persian entry into the city was remembered by official propaganda as an orderly, almost liberating arrival. Cyrus did not want to appear as the destroyer of Babylon. He wanted to appear as the king chosen by Marduk to restore order. And it worked. The city fell. Nabonidus was overthrown, and Babylon, one of the greatest jewels of antiquity, became part of the Persian Empire. But Cyrus did something that set him apart from many previous conquerors. He did not humiliate Babylon. He did not reduce it to ruins. He respected its temples. He recognized its gods. He used its symbols. He adopted the traditional Mesopotamian royal titles. And he allowed the city to remain an administrative, religious, and cultural center of immense importance. This was not weakness. This was imperial intelligence. Cyrus knew that an empire could not be held together by fear alone. Fear conquers cities, but it does not hold entire worlds together for generations. To rule Babylon, he needed Babylon to accept his authority. Therefore, the famous Cyrus Cylinder should not be understood as a modern declaration of human rights, but as something much more characteristic of its time. A royal document of legitimation. A political message, written in the religious and cultural language of Babylon. The new king did not come to destroy order, he came to restore it. With Babylon in his hands, Cyrus already controlled a vast empire: Persia, Media, Lydia, Mesopotamia, and the cities of Asia Minor. In just one generation, the Persians went from a regional people to rulers of the heart of the ancient world. But every empire, no matter how great, carries with it one unresolved question. What happens when the man who created it is no longer there? Cyrus created not just a state, but a model for governing different peoples, cultures, and worlds under one authority. He showed that an empire could be built not only with the sword, but also with reason, patience, and an understanding of human nature. But this is where the greatest test begins, because creating an empire is one thing, maintaining it after the death of its creator is something else entirely. And the history of Persia would yet show how powerful an empire could become, and how dangerous it was when greatness began to become a burden. If you found this video interesting, subscribe to the channel. Here we tell the stories of the great empires, rulers, and battles that changed the world forever.